So first of all, let me thank the, the Development Management Institute. It is a great pleasure to be speaking to all of you on COVID pandemic, experience and lessons and future of public health. I'm Dr. Dilip Mavdankar, Director, Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar. Can I have the next slide? As we are going to discuss about this huge pandemic, I thought it will be a good idea to recapitulate little bit about the knowledge which we have gathered over the last 1 year about the pandemic. Can I have the next slide, please? Can we shift the slide to the next one? Are you able to hear me? I think there is some issue. Yes, please move the next slide. Can you go to the next slide? I can't see it on my screen, so I don't know what is the. I can't see the slides moving on my screen. So, okay, if you can, yeah, project whatever the slide is there, then that might work, I think.
Yes, sir. We are working on that. We are working on that, sir.
Okay, okay. Sure. I can see on the screen, so if you can just shift it or share your screen, then I will be able to see. So should I try from my side? Should I share my screen and see if that works?
1 minute. 1 minute.
Yeah. Okay, now I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah, great. Slides, right? Sir, you can try changing your slides, sir, once.
Yeah. Should I share my screen?
Yes, sir, please. Yes, sir, please. Yes, sir.
Yeah, are you able to see my slide?
Yes, sir. True.
Okay, so then I can share from here. So that is fine. All right? Yeah, yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, this is fine. This is fine. Okay, yeah, let us start. Okay, sorry for this technical little bit glitch, but what I thought is I will first share with you how this all started. It started in a city of Wuhan. As you know, it is city like Bombay, very modern, 1.1 crore population, 11 million, not 1.1 million. That is a typographic error, in the middle of China, in Hubei province. And it was unknown pneumonia. And the people who saw these pneumonia cases, when they looked at their residents, it was very clear that there was some link to the wet market in Wuhan, where all kinds of animals are slaughtered and sold. And this was the beginning of a new sort of pandemic. And a very young, bright doctor from China, Dr. Li Wenliang, first reported this, saying there is something abnormal, very abnormal SARS-like cases, because they had seen SARS earlier. Similar respiratory disease is happening, but somehow Chinese government and media, etc., called him a rumor monger and didn't pay any attention to him. And unfortunately, he himself, while treating the first few cases, developed the disease and also unfortunately passed away. On the right, you will see the hospitals which are shown as in red, and the market which is very close to the hospital from where this infection probably spread. And now the WHO team is there to investigate the whole thing. There are international publications on this now available. And if you see very rapidly, the Chinese government and the Disease Control Agency and WHO started acting on this and started reporting the number of cases, even the spread of the cases were also recorded. Early January, it spread to Thailand, Korea, Japan. So it was very clear that there was human-to-human transmission, and it is a very rapidly spreading virus. And by 20th of January, healthcare workers also got infected. So it was rapidly spreading and highly infectious. That is what was known by January end. This is from a paper published from China. They traced the whole epidemic of Wuhan city, and the dark bars are related to the seafood market or wet market of Wuhan, and rest, the light pink bars, are all the cases not linked. So which means human to human transmission had started almost from the end of December. Some cases early and then later on. So, and China took very strict measures of locking down Wuhan province completely. And by 20th or 25th of January, the cases in Wuhan declined and the epidemic stopped. But parallelly, because Chinese New Year was there around 25th of January, many people traveled from Wuhan and spread the disease to many parts of China as well as to the world. The virologist immediately identified this, and these are some of the pictures of the virus. As we know, it is a SARS group of virus, and the pandemic is called COVID-19, and the virus, WHO named it as SARS-CoV-2 because there was SARS-CoV-1 virus. So this was, and this is the structure of the virus. It is an RNA virus, and it has spike proteins, membrane protein, and a lipid membrane. So these are all very important things for development of vaccines. Now, if you look at the epidemiological determinant, so how does the disease spread? It belongs to coronavirus, and it spread first from animals, probably from bats and pangolins, and then to humans, and it had already evolved. So it was spreading, then it started spreading from human to human transmission. And that was known, similar thing in SARS, which happened in 2002 in China and Hong Kong, but with few thousand cases, it stopped. And similar, another virus called MERS, which is Middle East coronavirus, Middle East respiratory virus, that was in 2012. It is started in Saudi Arabia in camels and then transmitted to humans. That also stopped with very few cases, some thousand cases. But this virus, in some sense, had modified substantially and was becoming very infectious to the humans. The mode of transmission, as we all know, is now very clear, that from individuals who are infected, it gets into, well, people talk, cough, sneeze, into droplets, which are small drops of saliva and nasal secretion, and those travel to other people and who are susceptible, they get infection. It can also travel by hands, and that is why we have been saying hand washing and indirect contact with surfaces. So these are the three main modes of transmission. There's just on the left-hand side a picture of how the disease droplets come out when somebody sneezes or coughs. One thing which is not well communicated, and that's why I put this slide, is there is a lot of role for ventilation. If the ventilation is not good, the rooms are closed, air conditioned is there, etc., then the virus doesn't get diluted and can be spread. But in the lower panel, if you see the ventilation is good, room windows, doors are open, then the virus spread is much, much lower. So that we must keep. Even today, we all talk about other measures, but the ventilation measure is still not very well accepted and understood. This is another way of showing that how far the coronaviruses can transmit. The larger the droplets, they fall at around 3 feet, within 3 feet. But smaller droplets, later on it was seen that they can become airborne and go up to 6 feet. So that's why if you remember, first we started talking about 3 feet distance or 1 meter or 8 gaj. After that we went to 2 meters or 6 feet distance to prevent transmission of infection. Now, India is a very congested, and especially in the cities, if you see some of the markets, and I have took pictures from internet, very, very congested markets and areas are there, especially slums, poor colonies, where there is a major chance of spread. And that is what happened. That virus came from abroad through the airports and spread in the cities. Fortunately, our rural areas are not so congested, and that is why the spread of the disease in rural areas is very minimal. Even though 60% of population, 60-70% in rural areas, the disease spread is only 20-30% in rural areas. Major spread is in the cities. Now, if you look at the clinical manifestation, or how does the disease appear, it is mainly fever, cough, fatigue means tiredness, loss of appetite, shortness of breath meaning breathlessness, production of sputum, myalgia, etc. And sometimes people develop stomach upset, diarrhea, nausea, etc. So this was a new disease. So early on, the scientists classified what are the kind of symptoms from which one can suspect this disease. If you look at the global scenario, so far, we have had 10.8 crore cases and reported deaths are 24 lakhs throughout the world. Rough crude mortality ratio is 2.2% of people who got affected died. And many countries adopted lockdowns and then gradual opening, and some countries in winter had a second peak. So they had to lock down again, especially in Europe and US. If you look at the epidemic curve in India, we started getting cases in March and April, very few cases. From May onwards, it started rising. And in September, we almost reached, second week of September, we reached about 1 lakh cases per day. And then since then it has been declining, and now we are at about 10 to 15,000 cases per day. So total of 1 crore plus cases and 1.5 lakh deaths. So our mortality ratio works out to be roughly 1.5%. In India, different states were affected differentially. Initially, it started wherever the major airports were. Later on, and a lot of international traffic, the first case appeared in Kerala, but later on, the state, and now especially state of Maharashtra and Kerala, which were earlier spared, were badly affected. Gujarat has a lower infection rate, and Bihar also has low infection rate as of now, but especially Maharashtra, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, so many of the southern Indian states have high infection rates. The stages of transmission, as we know, so to prevent any disease, you must know how it is transmitted. So first it came via travelers, which reached India from China first and later on from Europe, where the disease had spread. So the first and most important thing in the next pandemic we must ensure of this type is to prevent entry of travelers from abroad, wherever the disease has spread. Second stage is when the travelers who come in transmit it to their families or to their locality. So what is called a local transmission. So most of the cases will have history of contact with somebody who has traveled from abroad and developed the symptoms. The third stage is what is called as community transmission, which is that the people develop cases by infecting each other in the community and there is no contact from foreign source. And in most of the cases, you are not able to trace where the infection came from. The fourth is what is called as endemic, and that is where we are now coming, that the disease becomes very mild and the virus remains in the community and doesn't cause an epidemic, but doesn't also disappear, but causes few cases here and there throughout the year. Now, this is exactly what has happened in chikungunya. I don't know if you know, chikungunya was another similar virus disease, but it was mosquito-borne virus disease which came to India from Africa in 2006 and became a big epidemic in 2006-7 and later became endemic, and still there are chikungunya cases happening gradually. So what we did in IIPH, one of the things was to understand the transmission of the disease. So what is called a secondary attack rate. That is how many secondary cases develop once somebody in a family develops one case. So if a family has 5 people and one person develops the disease from or gets it from outside, then after a few days, second, third cases may appear in the family. And that is what is called as a secondary attack rate. So how much transmission, because family, there is no social distancing, everybody living together. There is no mask, generally people will not wear. So the chance of transmission is high. So our studies from literature as well as primary studies through telephone interviews we carried out showed that the secondary attack rate is between 5% to 50%. In some of the studies, it was very high at 50%, but most studies was between 10 to 15%. So we also studied, and we have published these papers, we also studied what is the secondary attack rate outside the family. For example, somebody is in an office. He doesn't know that he has been developing the disease. So he goes to the office. He has suppose 10 employees who are sitting with him. Then how many of them will develop? So outside of home, again, the infection rate is lower, variable, but lower, about 5 to 10%. So even though the disease is very infectious, the secondary cases from primary case are not that high. If you map out the disease spread, what we will see is it is largely an urban virus. Largely 60–70% of the cases are focused on urban areas in any state. And I also wrote a small article saying that this is urban VIP virus. We were fortunate. We had expected that large outbreaks of this disease will happen in slum areas where poor people live or poor rural areas where health facilities are not very strong. But fortunately, the disease did not break out so badly in slum areas. For example, Dharavi, which is a major slum in Bombay, which has about 10 lakh people living, there were only 3,000 cases happened and some deaths. But the disease spread widely, but very few cases happened. So on the other hand side, if you see many ministers, many MPs, many business people, upper middle class people, lot of people got infected and also died. So this virus, in some sense, has a predilection for people who are in the richer segments of the society. The other issue, which was not very clear at the beginning, is what percentage of cases are asymptomatic or does not develop symptoms. And the first data came from Diamond Princess, which was a ship, cruise ship, on which this epidemic happened. And all of them were tested, and they showed that 18% of the cases total did not develop any symptoms. And especially young children, young adults are more likely to be symptomatic. Older people do develop symptoms after some days. It was also not clear how many secondary cases will develop from a asymptomatic case. Because if that ratio is very high, then the control of the disease becomes very difficult, because you can't really find out asymptomatic cases unless you test everybody, and that is very, very difficult. So that is what lot of confusion initially was there, saying how many asymptomatic cases and whether they transmit disease or not. If you look at the overall clinical picture or cases, it was good that 80% were mild influenza-like illness, which on itself, without any treatment or with simple paracetamol treatment, subsided. Then 15%, so 80% had fever with cough and not much other symptoms. 15% had moderate to severe symptoms, which has dyspnea, that means difficulty in breathing, and low oxygen saturation, which becomes then serious. And 5% cases became critical, where they developed respiratory failure and needed to be admitted to the hospital, given oxygen, given intensive treatment. And as I said, mortality was 1 to 3%. Initial months in April, the mortality figures which were arrived at were 7-8%. Now, it was not clear whether it was really high or only very severe cases went to the hospital. But even doctors who are treating saying that in April the disease was very severe and later on the disease started getting milder and milder. The main factors which led or have increased risk of mortality is age, comorbidities, that is with other disease like diabetes, hypertension, overweight, are strong risk factors for complications, illness, and death. And even more deaths are seen in men than in women. The epidemic control strategy has mainly three pillars. First is prevention. So first you try to prevent the spread of the disease through social distancing, mask and sanitation, what are called as SMS. Then whatever the symptoms, you must test people with symptoms, so which is surveillance. So you must quickly test people with symptoms and report that data, and those who have the disease, then you should put them under isolation and treatment. So these are the three main things required for managing such epidemic or any other epidemic for that matter. As we talk of prevention, the general prevention, and we have heard it so many times that I don't want to spend much time, was hand hygiene, cough etiquette, environmental sanitation, personal protective kits, social distancing, screening, quarantine, surveillance, and basically to reduce contact between people from which the disease get transmitted. And that is where we did the lockdown to prepare for preventing the disease as well as reducing. You must have heard the term flattening the curve, reducing the number of cases and preparing the hospitals to treat them. The social distancing was basically to avoid person-to-person contact through which the infection spreads. So many places, people tried to mark different places, how to stand in the lift, how not to crowd. You must have seen in the shops, they had made circles outside for standing in queue, etc. We closed down offices, schools, colleges, all public places, cinema theaters, everything was closed down. Even after reopening, many things were gradually opened so that person-to-person contact is reduced. There were a lot of massive IEC campaign and awareness and behavior change. These are the numbers from Gujarat, but many states had done several of these things on radio, TV, print media, person-to-person education of people for ensuring that proper COVID appropriate behavior. There was a new term coined called COVID appropriate behavior, so that minimum chance of infection spreading can happen. So this was what we did. Now I'm just highlighting some issues and challenges and lessons for future. The first is initially there was some confusion and not clear guidance on whether all should wear the masks. Even WHO said the masks are only required for medical people. If you remember January, February up to March. Later on, it became that all should wear the mask in all places outside of the home. Even within the home, you should wear the mask if you have contact or suspected or confirmed cases within. So mask became a major tool for preventing the disease. And how to ensure that people wear the mask was a major public health challenge. And that is why you have all government policies making fines if you don't wear mask in public, etc. And people also protested in many countries. So one measure of personal protection was using masks. Second was screening quarantine. The challenge was how do we develop very rapid screening and quarantine system, because tests were not very easy to do initially. Limited number of laboratories were there. So all suspected cases, foreign travelers as well as suspected cases were put in hospital, whether they had disease or not. So quarantine centers had to be opened and the people were separated out. And in Kerala, this was initially done very well. So that's why they had very low cases. But later on, in last few months, it spread to the community, and that's why the cases are very high. Later on, it was not possible to quarantine everybody in an institution. So home quarantine was started. And with that, also spread of the disease happened more in the community. The other thing is that the disease starts spreading 2 days before the symptoms appear. So even before quarantining the person, the disease may have already spread through him to the surrounding people. So the second thing was environmental sanitation. Hand washing, cleanliness of surfaces with alcohol or with sodium hypochlorite, cleaning and disinfecting. And you might remember in April and May, everybody was very much careful and concerned about, even newspapers were stopped. People were not touching anywhere. We had ways of avoiding any surface, etc. But later on, it was realized that this transmission via surfaces is not that important. The disease doesn't get so well transmitted. It is mainly by coughing, sneezing, and droplet infection. And there were, because of this phobia, there were many things done which were actually harmful. For example, sanitization tunnels. Some of the offices had developed that you walk through a tunnel and you will be sprayed by alcohol sanitizer. So many people were spraying, you must have seen on the TV, a person with infection in the house, they were spraying the house from outside or spraying the road. Now, all that is not really going to help in any way. So that was also a learning. Initially, people thought that is necessary, but that is not really very helpful. The main important thing is surveillance. The health department initially was not very good, but they developed many tools, many teams were developed for surveillance. They identified cases, put them under containment zones. Arogya Setu app was developed by people related to government, and it was heavily promoted and made compulsory under certain circumstances. The IIT Chennai people who were involved also developed something called Itihas. I don't remember the full form, but it is IT assisted some surveillance system, and I'll show you what it did. It tracked the mobility of the mobile phones and gave a map every day of where the suspected cases are moving or confirmed cases are moving. And this is a map of Gujarat showing where the cases are, and the darker the pink area, the more the concentration of cases. And that is where the government can pay more attention and control the disease. So this was another technology application for identifying cluster of cases, what are called as hotspots, for further scrutiny and control of the cases and containment. Gujarat also did a unique initial idea of, because what had happened was all the medical facilities had closed down and there was no medical facility available for general treatment. So they started what are called as Dhanvantari Rath, which is a mobile medical van. Also, they put instruments in that, including pulse oximeter, so that anybody who, because if somebody has cough, fever, and low oxygen saturation, it was assumed to be corona and sent immediately to hospital. Because it was also realized that many people develop this without much symptoms, but low oxygen saturation, what was called as then happy hypoxia. Even community volunteers carried this pulse oximeter to test because it shows immediately whether your oxygenation is good or bad. They also carried special drives for people with high contact, what are called as super spreaders, and tried to control them through various mechanisms. The other issue which was not well realized, that we are counting the cases, but what WHO had said very early on, that we must count what are called as SARI and ILI. ILI is influenza-like illness. Before any test happens, if you have cough and fever, you must count those cases because they are suspected of developing COVID. And SARI is cough, fever, shortness of breath, which is so severe that you have to admit to hospital. So surveillance of that, unfortunately, in India was not well done throughout the country. SARI surveillance was established in Gujarat through the ambulance system. But we had a good surveillance of confirmed cases. Where those who were laboratory positive, there was a centralized system of recording, reporting, and every day those cases were reported. And because the SARI surveillance was poor and initially the testing was not so high, we would have initially missed many cases in April and May. And that is how the disease spread. One thing which nobody paid attention was the monitoring of all cause deaths or monitoring of all deaths. And I am showing you a picture of what was established in the plague epidemic in 1664. Around that time in Britain, England, was called as bills of mortality. So they tabulated all deaths happening during the plague epidemic, whether because of plague or not because of the plague, every week, and published that data in a booklet. You see the picture of that booklet here. It was called Bills of Mortality, and the person's picture, John Grant, He was a simple man interested in statistics, and he ensured compilation through the government of this. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do that. And that is why there is a lot of criticism that we may have missed many deaths. Because abnormal increase in death in any area, city, village, town, can indicate during an epidemic that possibly the excess deaths could be because of the epidemic. Not everybody gets tested. Not everybody tested turns out positive. The best test is only 70% sensitive, so it will miss 30%. So we must develop and implement what is called as daily surveillance of deaths. All deaths to be surveyed every day, tabulated, and possible causes to be explored. If you go to a site called Euromomo, you will see for all European countries, every week these deaths are tabulated and compared with the past deaths. We also did not start autopsy very fast. Autopsies is the way we can find out what is the exact cause of death. Some autopsies were done in Delhi, some were done in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, etc. The other issue is testing facilities. We did not initially have lot of this molecular testing, RT-PCR, and that is why many cases may have been missed. But Government of India rapidly expanded the testing capacity. But in future, we must allow all private labs to do the testing rather than having the restricted license system. Because if you restrict, then the availability of tests becomes low. Second is we did not include X-ray suggestive cases and HR, which is high resolution CT scans positive cases in COVID, because many people did not get a positive test or could not wait for the test. They started isolation and treatment based on the X-ray and CT scan findings. So that also in next epidemic, we should include that. The cluster containment strategy, earlier after lockdown, we had large areas of containment, which became more difficult to handle and manage. So later on, micro containment was developed, which was more acceptable. And in future also, if you see, China did not have the whole country lockdown, did not have, except in Wuhan, they had very small areas under strict control. And still they could end the disease with about 100,000 or 80,000 cases. So if you have proper strategy, you can have much less cases. The other fact was fear was a helpful factor as well as a hindrance. Why fear was helpful? Because of the new disease and millions of deaths predicted by mathematical modelers, people and governments really got worried and acted, and they obeyed lockdown. Otherwise, people would not have ever remained in lockdown for 2 months. The other is isolation and the fear of death prevented many people from getting tested. They were so afraid that if I am positive, I will be isolated away from my family and I will not have any contact and I may die in isolation. So that is why even stigma and discrimination, many health workers were not welcome in their own societies and housing colonies because of this stigma and discrimination. Even health workers were afraid and they did not take, some of them even left jobs. They didn't want to be posted. So this was the only epidemic where even health workers are afraid of treating the patients. So it became a big challenge to ensure hospital staffing. Next, hospital preparedness. Given the massive surge which was expected, many governments rapidly developed the capacity of beds, staff, logistics, supplies, and rapid scale up of the facility, hospital facility. And it is a big endeavor. And we learned from what other countries had done, and during the lockdown period started developing hospital systems, which were very, very helpful. In my city of Ahmedabad, they developed 2 hospitals. One was a new hospital called SVP, which had 1,200 beds. in the civil hospital and SVP, which has 600 beds in Ahmedabad. So in many of the months, there was not much shortage of hospitals. They also joined with private sector and provided free care in private hospitals to the public patients. They got oxygen systems, ICU, etc. Lastly, we come to the vaccination. Now, vaccination is in some sense last chapter in this book of COVID. Now, vaccination is not new. 24 vaccines are available and more 25 vaccines, not COVID, but general vaccines are in pipeline. Vaccination first started in 1796 through cowpox and inoculation by Dr. Edward Jenner, who showed that cowpox prevented smallpox. And we also, through polio vaccination, removed the polio disease from our country. It is not globally eradicated, but eradicated from our country. So vaccine has lot of advantages and lot of new developments have happened in the science of vaccination. And given the priority internationally, within 1 year, these new vaccines are developed. 2 vaccines are available and they are available for emergency use. But it also led to a lot of controversy. Covishield vaccine was from Oxford AstraZeneca and Covaxin from Bharat Biotech. One of the reasons for controversy was that Covaxin, which is from Bharat Biotech, was given permission before third phase trials were over. And that led to a lot of media news, fear about vaccination, vaccine hesitancy, etc. Second is now disease has also gone down. So not many people are seeing new cases, and that's why people hesitate. Why to take a new unproven vaccine? Because disease is not there. Vaccine purchase and planning, Government of India has already bought roughly about 2 crore doses. The plan is to vaccinate 3 crore people with 6 crore doses, two doses each. 1 crore frontline workers and 1 crore other medical and other staff. The next is people above 50 and comorbid. So total 27 crores and they have total made an estimate of 30 crores. So this is a massive exercise. In this year's budget, coming year's budget, the government has provided 35,000 crores provision for buying vaccines, which is a very large financial provision. What we now need is very rapid expansion of the vaccine, but it is not yet decided whether government will give free vaccine to everybody. They have committed to give free vaccine to 3 crore people, 1 crore medical staff and 2 crore other COVID warriors or frontline workers like police, Anganwadi worker, etc. Now, one of the main reasons why people are afraid of vaccine is that this vaccine is developed very fast. In 1 year, in history, no vaccine was developed so fast. But this is not the reason to be afraid, because it is not, the fast development is not because of less science or less scientific proof, but because there are reduction in waiting time, fast availability of permissions because of the pandemic, international funding of vaccine research. Companies had already made platforms, what are called as platform, meaning basic material for vaccination, which were done for other vaccines, which was modified. Genetic engineering technology has also improved. So because of all of this and because of international scrutiny and pressure, this vaccine were made so quickly. So there is no reason to not believe the safety of the vaccine. Now, last question is the vaccine strategy which India has selected the appropriate strategy? What we are doing is in 3 phases. Vaccination will be done to about 30 crore people over 6 to 10 months. Now, we have done some analysis of where the disease has spread. If we look at 50 top districts out of 739 districts, total districts of India, 60% of the cases are in these districts. And that is where the deaths are 60% deaths are there. So for me, it would have been better if, as per my opinion, government should focus on these 50 districts where cases are maximum and try to achieve herd immunity through vaccinating 60-70% of the people rather than giving vaccine to all districts. So that is an alternate strategy one can think of. Now to end, I want to address key lessons what we have seen. First of all, the whole public health system needs to be strengthened substantially with staff, proper systems, labs, surveillance, data, reporting, and national and international protocols, public health cadre development at state level as well as national level. Second is building capacity to rapidly expand public health services, because in epidemic, you always need much more capacity than even Western countries could not manage the epidemic in spite of their large capacity. So we have to have capacity which is spare, which can be rapidly expanded. We have to make standard operating procedures, documents for future reference, make publications and database publications out of this, so that when future such pandemic comes, we are ready with the understanding of such pandemics. We must have mechanisms of rapid increase in funding, because many things sometimes are not happening because funding, government funding is limited, private voluntary funding is not available, etc. We have to develop protocols for rapid surveillance, testing, isolation, and lockdown on a local level. In UK, they have a system of lockdown level 1 to level 5. So instead of everything being shut down, depending upon how cases are progressing, you can shut down in a staged manner. And also we have to see how economy can be saved when such pandemics come. We have to make advance arrangements for public-private partnership, because the public system may not be able to cater to all the cases in a proper way. So that such arrangements have to be made in advance. Finally, we have to bring out new epidemic act. We are still relying on the British Act of 1897, which the British government left us. That's why we had to manage this pandemic with ad hoc arrangements through the Disaster Management Authority, not through the health department. Then proper communication to avoid controversies, fear, stigma, discrimination is also very important. We must be cautious, we must understand the risk, but not make people so afraid that they cannot take proper actions. Finally, we must have open data access for analysis and guiding the actions, because epidemic understanding comes from data and its analysis, not by some kind of administrative or political diktats. So the more data we have, the more data we can analyze, the more sharper analysis of the pandemic or epidemic can happen, and actions can be more focused. Thank you very much. So this is what I wanted to convey, that what we did during the epidemic, how it came, how we dealt with it. We have done quite well because of our natural immunity as well as the government actions taken. And the epidemic will end in about next 2 months. That is what I expect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We now open the session for question and answer.
Yeah, so let me stop sharing so that I can see the chat box. Yeah. Sure. So if there are any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them. If you can project them or if you can read them out in the question box.
Thank you, sir. There's a controversy about using sanitizer, acidic sanitizer on your hands, where the skin is actually alkaline. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. My sense is most of the sanitizers which were used are alcohol based, or you have to use soap and water to wash your hands frequently. And both of these will clear out the sticky substance which comes out from your sweat glands to protect and remain the skin or maintain skin moisture. So if that is not done, or that moisture is too much is removed, then lot of skin problems can come. So that is where this repeated hand washing as well as repeated sanitizers had uh, created some problems in some people who have anyway dry skin. Yeah. So any other question? Let me open chat box and see. Okay. Any other? Yeah.
Sir, we have spoken about the role of government and that of institutions. What about the role of public and the community in identifying such health crisis and coming to the mark? Unless they come up, only government and institutions can't do. So we will solicit your opinion on how to enable the community and the public at large in handling these crises. Please.
Yeah, the question is not clearly heard. So if somebody can repeat from there briefly, because the voice person speaking is not very clear to me.
Sir, I will try to make it clear.
Yeah.
Sir, we have so far covered the role of government and institutions. I think the community and public at large do have better roles to play. So could you identify?
I can't still hear. So somebody who understands the question, if they can repeat it in the microphone, that may be better. If somebody understands the question, or type out the question in the chat box, because voice is not very clear. So one question I'm seeing is a role of community and their responsibility. So of course, for any epidemic, community is very important, because the preventive actions are to be taken by the community. For example, hand washing, maintaining distance, wearing of the mask, everything the community has to do. The government can force you, but government cannot wash your hands. So if you are sick, you have to remain at home, etc. So community role is very important. Only thing is that community has to be properly explained and convinced that it is their responsibility and it is for their good. And that is where the role of information, education, communication and media comes, so that people will follow what is required to be followed.
Sir, there is another question in the chat box, sir.
Yeah. So there was a question on a new law. See, the Britishers brought the Epidemic Act of 1897 because there were epidemics of plague, cholera, etc. And in such epidemics, people's freedoms may have to be restricted. And that is where the laws are coming in helpful. Second is, the laws also give government extraordinary power to manage the epidemic through certain mechanism. For example, setting up temporary hospitals. Now, ideally, you can't set up a temporary hospital. Hospital has to be proper permissions, etc. So all of those kinds of things which are required in a pandemic or epidemic, the acts provide you special powers, and that is why the new act is required, because that act is more than 120 years old. So many things have changed. So that is why act is required. And the all acts are going to help the common people. It is to protect, because for example, suppose some person doesn't follow the rules, then he can be jailed if there is a provision in the act. But if there is no provision in the act, somebody is spitting, You can fine him, but you cannot jail him. So some of these things are required to make certain things compulsory, and that is why acts are important. Okay, any other question?
Yes, sir, there is one more question. My question was that recently in Indore, we saw, especially in Indore, the number of cases reported from the Shamshan and burial grounds of these places, the number was much higher than what was reported according to the COVID census. So do you really think that the number of COVID cases went unreported in this era? Actual death, number of actual
My
deaths.
sense is not only here, even in US, there were many deaths. In New York, there were reports saying some 500 deaths happened at home during the pandemic, and they were not even tested. So some of the countries have a policy, and some states also did, that suppose a person dies at home, then he has to be tested after death for COVID. And if a test comes out to be positive, he has to be declared for as COVID death. So that is where I mentioned that the bills of mortality of London was a mechanism where you count the total number of deaths, not what is COVID. Suppose in a city like Ahmedabad, I know we have done some work. Every day about 100 deaths happen because of various reasons in normal times in summer. Now when there is a big heat wave, instead of 100 deaths, 300 deaths in a day happened. Now that means that heat wave has led to 200 more deaths, but they are not all labeled as heat deaths because the death certificate doesn't write heat wave. It will say that some disease, some this thing, but they are all related to heat wave. So similarly in COVID times also, there are two reasons why death may increase. One is because of COVID itself. Second is because of the lockdown. People could not get treatment. People could not get their regular medicines. They could not get immediate treatment. Suppose they develop heart attack, they are in lockdown. Easily ambulance is not available, hospital is not available, doctor not available. So they may die. So such deaths will also increase the total deaths. So it is important to monitor the total deaths and then segregate how many because of COVID, how many because of other reasons. And whatever reported in Indore, I have seen in many cities. If you have seen in Tamil Nadu, they found out in Bombay also, they found out later on, they added hundreds of deaths after investigation to the COVID list.
Sir, there is one more question, sir.
Yeah.
What long-term impacts of COVID-19 on human body once gets caused? Long-term impacts.
I didn't hear what impact.
So it is already written in the chat box, sir. What are the long-term impacts of COVID-19 on human body if one gets positive?
Let me see.
It is already in the chat box, sir. What
I
are the
only see the separate, last question is the separate role of community. I can't see in chat box, but can you repeat the question or somebody else can repeat the question?
What are the long-term impacts of COVID-19 on human body if one gets positive?
Long-term impacts of COVID-19, is that what you are asking?
Yes, sir, on human body. Human body.
Yeah, human body. Sure. As of now, there are literature showing that 10% of the COVID cases, not so much reported here, but in Europe and America, they are called long haulers. So they get symptoms continued for a long time, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And vague symptoms are there, memory loss is there, sometimes confusion, mental fog, what is called is there, sometimes fatigue, which is the most common long-term symptom, sometimes mild fever, etc. So that is what is called as long haul COVID. So COVID having longer and longer, normally it cures itself in about 2 weeks time, but these are for months together. So that is a long-term effect. Second long-term effect has been seen is on respiratory system. So the respiratory capacity goes down, especially because if you have a severe lung damage, then the lung is replaced by fibrous tissue, which is the repair kind of tissue or repair cells, and that doesn't help in breathing. So person's respiratory capacity may be limited, and that is how his whole life may become affected. Some people, I know personally one case, he is now permanently on oxygen. His lung capacity was already limited, then he developed COVID, and now he has to carry his oxygen machine all the time. So there are such lung related known effects. Other organ known effects are yet not clear, but there are studies going on to measure effects on other organs. Of course, immediate effects are known, like heart gets affected, kidneys get affected, brain get affected. So many tissues get affected, blood vessels get blocked. So those kinds of things are well known. Okay, any other questions, comments?
Sir, this is the last question, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you very much indeed. It was very storming. So I just want to understand that while the virus has very severe impact in certain areas, like in certain pockets, like as in Europe, it has devastating impact. But compared to Europe and USA, it's in Africa, it has very mild impact. So what was the reason? Actually, I was staying in Amsterdam, and my roommate was Ghanaian. So he was always saying, "Oh, it's not going to impact Ghana or Africa." So, what is your observation? This particular?
Yes. So
Thank you.
it is clear that in the Western countries, the impact of the virus has been much higher, especially mortality percentages in some countries are 10%, 15%, etc. Whereas in India and Africa, it is like 1%, 0.5% or so. So there are two explanations possibly. One is that in the Western country, the populations are much older. People above 60 years, people with comorbidity, people with overweight, etc., are much higher than what we have currently here. So younger population means less kind of problem with this disease, because older population has much more severe disease. So that is one factor. Second is some kind of a innate immunity. Because of several infections, other diseases prevalent in the developing countries, we have already our immune system probably stronger than people in the Western countries. And that is where probably we have better protection. Third thing is that our testing is also low. So our cases, what we have found are, if you see the sero surveillance, now it is estimated that 21% of India's population is positive, which is roughly 25 crore people are positive. Now the total detected cases are only 1 crore. So there is also under detection of the cases, and that may be one reason, but largely because of the age and comorbidity difference, as well as some kind of innate immunity. And that is where I also told you that in the slums within India also, if you see, the richer people got more affected than the poorer people. That is what at least in Ahmedabad and in Bombay we have seen. I don't know what is the situation in Bihar, but very few people who are really poor got affected. And if they were affected, they were mildly affected. So, but such analysis needs to be done to exactly say why these differences are.
So we have no question further. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful summarizing the experiences of COVID-19 since it has been identified and the lesson learned from the handling this situation at various levels. Your session has shed light on what needs to be done in the future based on the lesson learned. Thank you, sir. With this, the first session on health comes to a close. We now break for the lunch and reassemble at 1:50 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.